Good afternoon, students. I am happy to bring to you our final module for this semester. We're looking at the play Moon on a Rainbow Shawl. Try to identify your characters here. I found a beautiful image for you. This is Charlie polishing bats, cricket bats. And this must be Charlie's wife, so she's Sophia. And this must be Esther, that's a daughter. And here, maybe she's Mavis. And one of these guys would be Ephraim. So, yeah, we've got a good example here. Maybe this is a familiar scene if you're at Tiger Bay or one of those areas that's depressed. So, in introducing Errol John's play, I've a few points here for you. It was set in 1947 in Trinidad. Migration is a significant theme. You'll find the destination for migrants at that time. It was England, London. Ephraim is heading for Liverpool. And at that time, Caribbean countries were still dependent on the mother country, England. And that explains why people weren't going to America. So the play is a microcosm of society. It addresses social issues, and I've said most of it here. And there's a beautiful poem that captures the essence. Martin Carter has a poem that says, "I come from the nigger yard." So do a little research and see what you get about nigger yards and yard, and you'll be able to understand the yard theater. For your homework, you were working on producing your own sketch, and we were using the notes at the beginning of the text, and you were inclined or encouraged to check out the time, the place, the atmosphere, the mood. How many days the play covers? I think it's probably 3. Check it out and see. And then I've captured some of the themes here for you. You might have some of them already, so all you'll do is see which ones you don't have. So the play addresses or it gives attention to gives us a view of family relationships, dreams and aspirations, education as a means of escape, the downtrodden matriarch, the emasculated male, the baby mother syndrome, something about entrapment, something about committing crimes. And then maybe there are forms of escapism that we've got to examine, and there's prostitution and there's exploitation. And Errol John has presented us with characters. And one way of looking at them, we could line them up. On one side, females. On the other side, males. When you do that, maybe we're doing an analysis of the social situation of men and women in Caribbean society. And so our women are Sophia, Rosa, Mavis. Our males are Charlie, Ephraim, Prince, Old Mac. And there are children playing ring games, and there's Esther. And so maybe what we're doing when we look at it like this, when we examine males versus females, we're saying these characters are just representative. So Sophia is representative of all women who are married and the husband and struggling to make a living. So characters as representative. And then it's important for you to keep in mind always that it's a play that you're examining and not a novel. Semester 1, I specifically had you sit and look at the play. I found an example of the play and I gave it to you because I wanted you to keep your analysis on what the playwright does. So analyzing and criticizing based on how the playwright designed it. This time I'm going to be a little bit more flexible with you. I'm not pinning you down to the playwright, but I'm going to allow you to do several kinds of interpretations of the play. And Maybe we're looking at costume and props, and when you do that, look at the shawl as something functional. What do we use shawls for? If you're going to stage the play, somebody would be a washerwoman, and that person will have to come with all the props, all the things. Prostitute should be dressed for her role, I think. Charlie, you're going to see him there on stage. Whenever you see him, he's engaged in fixing his bats. Esther, you see her saying her poem, and when she does that, she's captured in a particular role, and she represents something. Ephraim and the trolley bus, it represents the mundane, day-to-day living. That makes no sense to him. No, no, it doesn't improve his lifestyle. No, Rosa covered in the shawl brings another representation. So the shawl by itself is functional and has meaning. But when the woman is in the room with the shawl, I think it's on page 45 or 49, she's lying on Ephraim's bed. You see her with the shawl. And then as the play ends, you see her with the shawl again. Consider how the shawl functions there. Consider how the naming of the baby functions. And we see the play as a small version of Caribbean society. We say a microcosm of Caribbean society. And so the play is like a mirror. The play is an example of, and we use technical terms now, social realism. So your analysis, your interpretation doesn't have to be with the writer, but you could look at what's happening and examine social realism. And yes, it's another kind of realism you're going to be addressing. What do we see when we view this play on stage? And here, it's my human error when. So we sit in a theater and we watch it on stage. What do we see? They're images that are reflected back at us. And so you see literature functioning in a special way. It gives us ourselves so we could look at and criticize. What stereotypes do we recognize? Do you see your neighbor? Do you see um, probably your mother, your daughter, your sister, yourself? How many members of society can fit into those character sketches that Errol John has given to us? How do we see ourselves? Are we only the audience? Are we only the critic? And so, as we look at social realism, we get to the point where we ask, what is life? And so, question is asked by Ephraim, he says, so Rosa asked him, why are they quarreling and shouting in the streets? I think that was an incident with Mavis and the prostitute bringing her men in the yard. And Ephraim's response was, they're shouting so that they could ease the tension. What kind of tension? Tension of living like hogs. And so what is life? Life is that we live like hogs? I don't know. Another term that captures the kind of living in that yard setting is determinism. So this time you work your way through technical terms and you do your discussion. Determinism. It has to do with the feeling that one thing leads to another. It's a philosophy and a theory. Everything is predetermined and people are just pessimistic. And so Rosa says to Ephraim, full moon tonight. And F's response is, then we must be born last quarter. Examine what it means to be born full moon and means to be born last quarter. And yes, we're probably looking at Errol John's symbolic use of moon in the play. And another term related to determinism is fatalism. The view that fate has dealt me a terrible hand, there's nothing I could do about it. One such interpretation, I find people attributing that to the pandemic. You can't do anything about it. I'm not taking any vaccine. Well, I don't know that that's my outlook of life. On the other hand, contrary to being deterministic, fatalistic, you could consider that you have free will. And what do we mean by your free will? You could be optimistic, full of optimism. We make choices that influence our lives. We're not born illiterate, if and it means you'll always be illiterate. Something is wrong with how I wrote it. Being born illiterate does not mean that you will always be illiterate. So it means that we could change our situations. We continue to exist. We could improve our lives. We take responsibility for our actions. If we commit crimes, the law will determine punishment. Education is one vehicle for improving our lives. We can influence the direction of outcomes. And so that's if you're discussing free will. Remember when we did Antoinette in White Sagacity, we asked the question, was there any way she could have taken charge of the events in her life? Or is it that she was just destined to go that way? So, symbolism, we could look at the shawl. And here I've tried to capture one of the purposes of the shawl. And there are many others. So if you're going out on the seawall an evening, well, maybe I'm speaking about ladies my age. You have a dress that's, it's just these fine straps. You walk with a shawl, and there it is functional. See what you get with shawl, and notice rainbow color. So let me stay here just a little bit more. Consider the symbolism of the rainbow in Earl John's play. Take all the meanings that you could attach to rainbow, plug them in there and see what you get. All right. And then we're still with the moon now. And as Ephraim said, we must be born last quarter. But when I looked at it, this is last quarter. And so it means it's half dark and half light. Last quarter moon appears half lit by sunshine, half immersed in its own shadow. It rises in the middle of the night and it appears at its highest. And that's the site where I took it from. And so full moon is the moon that Rosa would like her baby to be born. And so there is a kind of symbolism that goes with full moon. When we talk about meanings now, we're going into a different domain. So moon, no light of its own. Moon you associate it with females. I've made a mistake. So you're going to switch it around. I tried to line them up. So the sun is having light of its own. The sun is associated with male, but the sun is associated with aggressive, being strong. The moon is associated with passive, so it must come over here and associated with that which is weak. But all this meaning now is something that predated us and we come to understand it. But in your study, you may come upon some individuals who question things. Ferdinand Saussure, he looked at the structure of things and he introduced concepts. Something must be a signifier, and that which it refers to must be the signified. So words have meaning. If we say a tree, there's an image of tree that we mean. On the other hand, Jacques Derrida came after Saussure and he says, there's no one-to-one mapping, there's no inherent treeness in the word tree. He said humans attribute names and meanings. And so he said it's an endless deferral of meaning. Endless deferral of meaning. When you go to the dictionary, it gives you 2, 3, 4 more words, and you find yourself going to look for the meaning of another one. So how do we deal with these binary constructs? When I say binary constructs, this here is it. Meaning, you divide everything. You're either this or you're that. And that means binary construct. How do we deal with it? We treat binary construct, maybe we trade it in for a continuum. And we're at the end. Thank you.